If you listen closely to the history of Harlem, past the jazz of the Cotton Club, past the poetry of Langston Hughes, and past the sermons of Sunday morning, you will hear a different sound. It is a low, terrifying sound. It is the sound of a match striking against a rough surface in the dead of night. History tells us that Ellsworth Bumpy Johnson was a gangster, a criminal, a man who ruled Harlem with a velvet glove and an iron fist. But history is often written by the people who didn't live in the gutters, the people who didn't have to watch their friends die because the law refused to protect them. This is not a story about a gangster. This is a story about a brother. This is a story about a phone call that shattered the peace of 1943. And it is the story of 7 days in March when the fires of hell didn't burn underground. They burned right in the middle of New York City. They say revenge is a dish best served cold. They are wrong. In Bumpy Johnson's world, revenge was served at 1,500 degrees Fahrenheit. Welcome to the untold story of the night. The KKK made the fatal mistake of crossing the King of Harlem. To understand the rage that consumed Bumpy Johnson, you first have to understand the love that fueled it. You have to know Marcus Coleman, known to the streets simply as Doc. Now you won't find Doc in the police records. He wasn't a shooter. He wasn't a runner. If Bumpy was the fist of Harlem, Doc was its heart. They met in 1925 on a train heading north from Charleston, South Carolina. Two skinny kids with holes in their shoes and fire in their bellies, escaping the suffocating racism of the Jim Crow South. Marcus was the one reading a torn medical textbook he found in a trash can, trying to stitch up a cut on Bumpy's arm with a needle and thread. That's how he got the name Doc. He fixed things. He fixed people. "We rise together," Doc had told Bumpy on that rattling train car. "We fall together, but we never ever go back to being nothing." Fast forward 20 years, 1943. Bumpy Johnson owns the streets. He walks into a room and the temperature drops. Police captains tip their hats to him. Judges owe him favors. He is the godfather long before the movies made that word famous. But Marcus Doc Coleman, he took a different path. He used Bumpy's money to build. He opened soup kitchens on 135th Street. He funded the jazz clubs where Duke Ellington played. He paid for the funerals of folks who couldn't afford a pine box. He was the man who whispered in Bumpy's ear when the violence got too loud. He was Bumpy's conscience. Bumpy often said, "I handle the darkness so Doc can stand in the light." March 18, 1943 was supposed to be a night of celebration. It was Doc's daughter's birthday. There was music. There was laughter. Bumpy and Doc stood on the balcony of the Savoy Ballroom, smoking cigars, looking out over the city they had conquered. "We made it, Bump," Doc had said, adjusting his glasses. "We actually made it." "We ain't done yet, Doc," Bumpy smiled. "The world is just waking up to us." Doc left the party at 2:00 a.m. He wanted to walk home. He said he liked the smell of the rain on the pavement. He said he felt safe. After all, this was Harlem. This was their kingdom. Who would dare touch the brother of Bumpy Johnson? He walked down Lenox Avenue humming a tune. The streets were empty. The streetlights flickered against the wet asphalt. He didn't see the black van with the taped-over license plates idling in the alleyway. He didn't see the 6 white men stepping out of the shadows, their boots heavy, their eyes full of a hatred that had traveled all the way from the Deep South. Marcus Doc Coleman walked into the dark, and he never walked out. 3:03 a.m. The phone rang in Bumpy Johnson's penthouse apartment. Usually Bumpy slept with one eye open, but tonight he was deep in a dreamless sleep, comfortable in the knowledge that his world was secure. The ring cut through the silence like a scream. Bumpy shifted, reached out a hand, picked up the heavy black receiver. "Yes." Silence. Not the silence of an empty line, but the heavy, suffocating silence of a room full of people holding their breath. "Who is this?" Bumpy asked, his voice rough with sleep. Then a voice. It wasn't a New York voice. It dripped with the slow, syrupy drawl of Alabama or Mississippi. It was a voice that sounded like old leather and stale whiskey. "Mr. Johnson, I apologize for the late hour, but we have a situation." Bumpy sat up. The hairs on the back of his neck stood up. "Who are you?" We are concerned citizens, Mr. Johnson. We feel that Harlem has forgotten its place. We feel that people like you, and people like your friend Doc, need a reminder of who really owns this country. Bumpy's blood turned to ice. Where is he? Oh, he's right here. He's been very brave, surprisingly brave, but everyone breaks eventually. Would you like to hear? There was a shuffling sound, then a muffled whimper. Speak up, boy, the southern voice commanded. Tell your king hello. Bumpy. The voice was weak, broken. It sounded like Doc was speaking through a mouthful of blood. Bumpy, don't come. It's a trap, don't. A dull thud, the sound of a heavy boot hitting ribs, a gasp of pain that turned into a cough. Bumpy gripped the phone so hard the plastic began to crack. If you touch him again, I will hunt you to the ends of the earth. The southern voice laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. Mr. Johnson, you don't seem to understand. We aren't holding him for ransom. We aren't asking for money. We are simply cleaning up. We call this purification. What do you want? Bumpy roared. We want you to listen. We want you to witness. So that tomorrow, when you look at your black kingdom, you remember that it is built on sand, and we are the tide. Then came a sound Bumpy would never forget. The uncapping of a metal canister. Glug, glug, glug. The heavy splash of liquid hitting the floor, hitting clothes, hitting skin. Gasoline, Bumpy whispered to the empty room. High grade, the southern voice confirmed. Burns hot, burns slow. No, Bumpy said. No, don't you do it. Listen to me. I will give you anything. I have money. I have territory. Take it. Just let him go. We don't want your money, dog. We want your fear. The strike of a match, a sharp hiss. And then the roar. It wasn't a scream at first. It was a gasp, the sound of oxygen being sucked out of the room by a sudden inferno. And then the screaming started. It was a sound that defied description. It was the sound of a soul being ripped from a body. Bumpy Johnson, the man who had ordered hits, who had seen men die in front of him, sat on the edge of his bed, trembling, tears streaming down his face, unable to move. He listened. He forced himself to listen. He listened to his best friend, the man who stitched his wounds and saved his soul, burn alive. He checked the clock, 3:07 a.m. The screaming didn't stop until 3:11 a.m. 4 minutes of pure agony. When the line finally went quiet, the southern voice returned. He wasn't out of breath. He wasn't shaken. He was calm. That is one. We have 6 more gallons of gas, Mr. Johnson, and plenty of matches. Tell Harlem. The Klan has arrived. Click. The sun rose over Harlem on March 19th, but it brought no light. The sky was gray, heavy with impending rain. At 6:00 a.m., a milkman found the body. It was dumped right in the middle of the intersection at 125th Street and Lenox Avenue, the heart of Harlem. It wasn't hidden. It was displayed. A charred, twisted shape that used to be a man. The only thing recognizable was a pair of metal glasses, melted into the asphalt nearby. Doc's glasses. By 8:00 a.m., a crowd of 500 people had gathered. They stood in silence. No one screamed. The shock was too deep. Police cars arrived at 8:15 a.m. Detective Miller, a corrupt cop on the Klan's payroll, stepped out chewing gum. He looked at the body, then looked at the crowd. All right, show's over, Miller shouted. Move along, probably just a drunk who fell asleep with a cigarette. A ripple of anger went through the crowd. A drunk, this was Doc. This was the man who fed them. This was a murder. Then the crowd parted. A black Lincoln Continental rolled to a stop. The door opened. Bumpy Johnson stepped out. He wore a black suit, a black overcoat, and a black hat. His face was stone. He didn't look like a man who had cried all night. He looked like death walking. He walked past the police. Miller tried to step in his way. Hey, Johnson, you can't be here. This is a crime scene. Bumpy didn't even slow down. He walked right up to Miller, looked him dead in the eye, and whispered something that made the color drain from the detective's face. You are standing on hallowed ground, Miller. Step aside, or you will be the next thing on the pavement. Miller stepped aside. Bumpy knelt by the body. He placed his hand on the charred pavement. He didn't say a prayer. He didn't say goodbye. He made a promise. He stood up and turned to the crowd. He saw the fear in their eyes. He saw the mothers holding their children tight. He saw the men looking at the ground, ashamed of their helplessness. "Go home," Bumpy said. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried over the wind. "Go home and lock your doors. Tell your families you love them. And tonight you pray for the souls of the wicked, because God may have mercy on them, but I will not." He got back in his car. As he drove away, the first drops of rain began to fall, washing the soot into the gutters of Harlem. Bumpy's headquarters was the basement of a funeral home on 145th Street, soundproof, hidden, fitting. Around a wooden table sat 5 men, the 5 fingers of Bumpy's hand. Willie the Blade, an ex-boxer who preferred knives to guns. Samson, a giant of a man who spoke rarely but acted decisively. Professor Jenkins, a former math teacher who handled the numbers racket. He was the strategist. Shorty, a wire-thin kid who could pick any lock in New York. Ghost, Bumpy's spy, a man so average-looking you would forget him the second he left the room. Bumpy stood at the head of the table. "They killed Doc," Bumpy said. "They burned him 4 minutes." The room was silent. Everyone loved Doc. He had treated Willie's broken nose. He had helped Professor Jenkins get a loan. He was family. "They think because they wear hoods we can't see them," Bumpy continued. "They think because they have the police in their pocket we can't touch them. They forgot where they are. This isn't Alabama. This isn't Mississippi. This is Harlem." He threw a map onto the table. It was a map of New York City, but marked with red ink. "Ghost," Bumpy asked, "tell me you have them." Ghost nodded. He pulled out a notebook. "I tracked the van, boss. It led back to a warehouse in Red Hook, Brooklyn, owned by a shell company, but the real owner is a man named Elias Thorne." "Elias Thorne," Bumpy tasted the name. "Who is he?" "Grand Dragon of the New York chapter. He's not just a racist, boss, he's a sadist. He runs a crew of 6 men, ex-military, dishonorable discharges. They call themselves the Cleansers." 7 men, Bumpy said, counting Thorne. 7 men, Ghost confirmed. They meet every night at a bar in Staten Island called the Rusty Nail, cop bar, safe territory for them. Bumpy looked at his crew. "We aren't going to just kill them," Bumpy said. "Killing is too easy. A bullet to the head is mercy. Doc didn't get mercy." He walked to the corner of the room and picked up a red metal canister. He placed it on the table with a heavy clang. "We are going to send a message. We are going to speak their language. Fire." "Boss," Professor Jenkins spoke up nervously, "if we do this, the FBI, the National Guard, they'll come down on us. This is war." "They started the war," Bumpy said, his eyes burning with a cold blue flame. "I'm just finishing it. We have 7 days, 1 man a night. We make them watch each other die. We make them feel the fear Doc felt." He looked at Willie. "Get the cars." He looked at Samson. "Get the ropes." He looked at Shorty. "Get the gas." "Tonight," Bumpy said, "we go hunting." Target 1, Raymond Ray Miller, the driver. Ray Miller was feeling good. He was sitting in the Rusty Nail, drinking a beer, laughing with his buddies about the bonfire in Harlem. "Did you hear him scream?" Ray laughed, slapping the table. "Sounded like a tea kettle." At 11:00 p.m., Ray stumbled out of the bar. He walked to his car, fumbling with his keys. He was humming a tune. He didn't notice that the streetlights had been shot out. He opened his car door. Before he could sit down, a wire wrapped around his neck. Samson pulled him backward, dragging him into the darkness of a waiting van. Ray woke up in a place that smelled of rust and damp earth, an abandoned subway tunnel beneath Harlem. He was tied to a chair. A single light bulb swung above his head. And sitting in the shadows, smoking a cigarette, was Bumpy Johnson. "Where am I?" Ray stammered. "Do you know who I am? I'm with Elias Thorne. You touch me, you're dead." Bumpy took a long drag of his cigarette. "Elias Thorne can't help you here, Ray. God can't help you here." Bumpy stood up. He walked into the light. Ray saw the gas can in his hand. "No," Ray whispered. "No, please." You drove the van, Ray, Bumpy said softly. You drove my brother to his death. Did Doc beg you to stop? Did he ask for mercy? I was just following orders, Ray screamed. We all make choices, Bumpy said. He began to pour. The smell of gasoline filled the tunnel. It soaked Ray's shirt, his pants, his hair. Ray was sobbing now, screaming for his mother. 4 minutes, Bumpy said, checking his watch. Doc lasted 4 minutes. Let's see if you're as tough as he was. Bumpy lit the match. He didn't look away, he watched, he listened. When it was over, Bumpy left the body there. He pinned a note to the charred remains. 1 down, 6 to go. The next 3 days were a blur of violence that New York City had never seen before. Night 2, 2 Klan members, the twins, Mickey and Patrick, were found in a dumpster behind a police station. They weren't burned. They were drowned in a vat of industrial tar. A note was nailed to the dumpster. The black stain doesn't wash off. Night 3, the Klan's explosives expert, a man named Boomer, tried to set a trap for Bumpy. He rigged his apartment with dynamite. Ghost found out. Bumpy's men didn't enter the apartment. They simply locked the doors from the outside and threw a Molotov cocktail through the window. Boomer died in his own fire. Panic began to spread through the white underworld. The invincible Klan was being hunted. Elias Thorne went into hiding. The police were helpless. They tried to raid Harlem, but every time they kicked down a door, the room was empty. Harlem was protecting Bumpy. But then the Klan struck back. Night 4, the escalation. Elias Thorne, desperate and furious, didn't target Bumpy. He targeted the innocent. At 8:00 p.m., a drive-by shooting occurred at the soup kitchen Doc had built. 3 volunteers were killed, an old woman and 2 teenagers. Bumpy stood in the wreckage of the soup kitchen, glass crunching under his boots. He picked up a blood-stained apron. It belonged to the woman who made the cornbread Doc loved. This wasn't just business anymore. This was an extermination. Agent Melvin Purvis of the FBI arrived the next morning. He sat in Bumpy's office. Purvis was a smart man. He knew he couldn't arrest Bumpy without starting a riot that would burn down New York. Mr. Johnson, Purvis said, adjusting his glasses, you are tearing this city apart. I am cleaning it, Bumpy replied. You've killed 4 men in 4 days. Brutal medieval killings. The press is calling you a monster. They called Doc a victim. I prefer monster. I can't protect you, Bumpy, Purvis warned. The National Guard is being mobilized. If you don't stop, they will roll tanks into Harlem. Let them come, Bumpy said, but not before I get Thorne. Thorne is gone, he's vanished. You'll never find him. I will find him, Bumpy said, because a rat always returns to its nest. Night 7. Ghost found him. Elias Thorne wasn't in a warehouse. He wasn't in Staten Island. He was hiding in plain sight, in a church basement in Queens. Bumpy didn't bring the crew this time. He went with only 2 men, Willie and Samson. It was raining hard, a thunderstorm that shook the windows of the church. Bumpy kicked open the doors of the church. Thorne was waiting. He had 5 armed guards with him. I knew you'd come, boy, Thorne shouted from the altar. He was holding a Bible in one hand and a shotgun in the other. Come to meet your maker. I am the maker tonight, Bumpy said. The shootout lasted only 30 seconds, but it felt like a lifetime. Gunfire erupted, stained glass shattered, pews splintered. Samson took a bullet to the shoulder but kept moving, snapping the neck of a guard. Willie used his knives to disarm another. Bumpy walked straight down the aisle. Bullets whizzed past him. He didn't flinch. He fired his .45 with calm precision. Bang, bang, 2 guards fell. Thorne raised his shotgun. Bumpy fired first. The bullet hit Thorne's hand, shattering the shotgun stock. Thorne fell back against the altar, bleeding, screaming. Bumpy stood over him. You, Thorne spat blood. You are an animal. No, Bumpy said. I am a man you should have left alone. Bumpy didn't use gasoline this time. He didn't use a match. He dragged Thorne to the baptismal font, a pool of holy water near the altar. You wanted to purify us, Bumpy asked. Let's purify you. He shoved Thorne's head into the water. Thorne thrashed. He kicked. He struggled, but Bumpy's grip was iron. 1 minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes. Bumpy leaned close to the water, whispering to the drowning man, "Say hello to Doc." At 4 minutes, Thorne stopped moving. Bumpy pulled him out and let the body drop onto the cold stone floor. He looked up at the crucifix hanging above the altar. He crossed himself. "It is finished." The next day, the newspapers reported a gangland shootout in Queens. They didn't mention the Klan. They didn't mention Marcus Coleman. But Harlem knew. The KKK never set foot in Harlem again while Bumpy Johnson was alive. They learned the lesson that was written in ash and blood. You can burn a cross, but you cannot burn a kingdom. Bumpy Johnson lived for another 25 years. He went to prison. He came out. He grew old. But every year on March 18th, Bumpy would go to the cemetery. He would stand at Marcus Doc Coleman's grave. He would light a cigar, take 2 puffs, and place it on the headstone. He never spoke. He just stood there listening to the silence. Because in the end, revenge doesn't bring your friends back. It just quiets the ghosts for a little while. And if you walk down 125th Street late at night when the rain is falling and the city is asleep, some say you can still smell it, faintly, under the smell of exhaust and rain. The smell of gasoline and the memory of fire. The next day, the newspapers reported a gangland shootout in Queens. They didn't mention the Klan. They didn't mention Marcus Coleman. But Harlem knew. The KKK never set foot in Harlem again while Bumpy Johnson was alive. They learned the lesson that was written in ash and blood. You can burn a cross, but you cannot burn a kingdom. Bumpy Johnson lived for another 25 years. He went to prison. He came out. He grew old. But every year on March 18th, Bumpy would go to the cemetery. He would stand at Marcus Doc Coleman's grave. He would light a cigar, take 2 puffs, and place it on the headstone. He never spoke. He just stood there listening to the silence. Because in the end, revenge doesn't bring your friends back. It just quiets the ghosts for a little while. And if you walk down 125th Street late at night when the rain is falling and the city is asleep, some say you can still smell it, faintly, under the smell of exhaust and rain. The smell of gasoline and the memory of fire. History remembers Ellsworth Bumpy Johnson as many things: a gangster, a poet, a kingpin, and a survivor. But in the quiet alleys of Harlem, he is remembered for that one week in 1943. The week he proved that some men are too dangerous to be hunted. The KKK came to Harlem to plant seeds of fear. They left behind nothing but ash and a lesson that would be whispered in their secret meetings for decades. They learned that the law might look the other way and the government might stay silent, but the streets of Harlem have a code. And Bumpy Johnson was the judge, the jury, and the executioner. But as we close this chapter, we are left with a haunting question. Was Bumpy Johnson a hero who protected his people when no one else would, or was he a monster who became exactly what he was fighting against? Revenge is a cycle. It balanced the scales for Marcus Doc Coleman, but it also cost Bumpy a piece of his soul. Every life he took, every fire he lit, added a new brick to the wall of his isolation. He saved Harlem, but he could never save himself from the memories of those 4 minutes. The files on these 7 days remain buried in the deepest archives of the FBI. No names were ever officially recorded. No arrests were ever made. But the silence that followed in Harlem spoke louder than any headline ever could. If this story hit you differently, if you felt the heat of those fires and the weight of that justice, then you belong here with us. This is the Untold legend, where we exhume the stories the world tried to bury. What would you have done if you were in Bumpy's shoes? Would you have turned the other cheek, or would you have struck the match? Let us know in the comments below. We read every single one of them. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell. Because next week, we are diving into the world of another man who dared to challenge the system, the Teflon Don himself, John Gotti. You won't want to miss the rise and fall of the man who thought he was bigger than the law. Until then, remember, history is rarely black and white. It is written in the gray areas in the shadows, and sometimes it is written in fire. This is the untold legend. Stay curious, stay vigilant.